Hi everyone, I'm Kyle Dyer and welcome to Colorado Inside Out on this Friday, January the 3rd. Quite often this holiday week is a quiet one when it comes to news, but we have had the deadly truck attack in New Orleans this week, the Colorado Springs Army sergeant found dead inside the Cybertruck that exploded in Las Vegas, and the death of the 39th President of the United States. Our flags will be at half staff for most of the month because of the passing of Jimmy Carter. While all of us are returning to work, our state leaders are going back to work next week, and the new administration will be going in a few weeks from now. With all that being said, let me introduce you to this week's Insider panel. We have Patty Calhoun, founder and editor of Westward; Tyrone Glover, civil rights and criminal defense attorney here in Denver; Chris Rourke, consultant with Rourke Media; and Laura Aldrete, a city building consultant and former planning director for the city and county of Denver. The 75th Colorado General Assembly will convene this coming Wednesday. New members meet up on Monday, but a number of committees have already been meeting during the off-season. But also, right before the start of the session gets going, Colorado Attorney General Phil Weiser has announced that he wants to run for governor in 2026 to succeed Jared Polis. Patty, this is the first candidate, probably amongst many, and we're just starting 2025.
The first candidate to officially announce. You can tell that others have been posturing for some time. Jenna Griswold, for example, and a poll last month surprisingly showed that she was more favorably regarded than some of the other big names like Joe Neguse, who actually polled higher as a potential to win. Ken Salazar back, he left his Senate seat in 2010 to go into the cabinet, but he is still rumored to be making a run. But Phil Weiser did not let any grass grow under his feet at the start of 2025 because he came out on Thursday, January 2nd, and said, I'm definitely running. And we will see, I'm guessing, at least half a dozen other candidates jump in. Some who might be in the legislature that starts just next week. They're already meeting. One of the big issues was the secrecy issue, which they got hit on, legislators last year, for exempting themselves from some open meetings. So let's hope at the very least this next session is conducted in daylight with the public able to see what's going on. And
there'll be a lot of talk about the budget too, so that is important stuff that we all need to know about.
Oh, it's grim.
Yeah. Tyrone.
AG Weiser announcing recently, I think is really going to get this kicked off, and it's going to be, I think, a very dynamic and crowded primary and election. And there's lots of, I think, precedent if you look back, as for an AG or a lawyer ascending to this position. Governors Ritter and Romer were both legally trained, and currently, on both sides of the political spectrum, we have Greg Abbott in Texas, who's the former AG, in California. Previously, prior to Newsom, we had Jerry Brown. And so I think, it makes a lot of sense for him to enter, and maybe his entrance kicks off a whole bunch of momentum and ultimately gets people into this race and gets people excited. As a lawyer, oftentimes I feel like the AGs and the DA and those sorts of races get overshadowed. So maybe even that gives a little bit of attention to sort of where some of these folks have come from and some of these down ballot issues as well.
And you said you worked with him at the law school that you went to?
So when I was at CU Law School, go Buffs, Phil Weiser was the dean there as well. Have known him for a long time. I've known a number of the, I think, candidates who are probably going to announce. So I think this is going to be a really exciting race for all Coloradans.
Okay. All right. Chris.
Well, with Phil Weiser running, no surprise there. I mean, it's been long talked about that he would eventually run. What will be interesting on the Republican side, does Senator Barb Kirkmeyer get involved in the race, or Representative Congressman Greg Lopez, who will be coming off his 6-month stint in Congress, will he parlay that into a run? But as to Patty talking about the open meetings issue with the Colorado lawmakers, there was a hearing this week that is required by the law. It was SB 24-157 that was passed last year, that there would be public feedback on the law. A lot of testimony. Kevin Dale from CPR made the point of the important thing about being a part of open meetings laws, complying with them, is not necessarily knowing how people voted on things, but what is the how behind the decision? His comments were stellar. Public policy needs to be conducted in public, period.
Okay, Laura.
Well, I'm going to have a different opinion about the open meetings law, and should there be the public
engaged in the process of government, yes, and lawmaking. I think the intent of the law that passed last year was really to clean up a 50-year-old law. Should the caucuses have been open? 100%. And I think there was egg on the Democrats' face for sure, and they are trying to make up for that. However, having been in a position as an appointee in public government and local government, it is very difficult to brainstorm, to have bad ideas and to create out of those bad ideas good ideas and then strategize around that when somebody is always like peeking into your business and then putting it in the papers, right? Like you become very cautious. And so I would just say I think there's a balance here, and I think this law is trying to get at that. And I'm seeing all the staring from all of my panel guests here who are disagreeing with me. But it is a very difficult to govern with everything peeled back.
Okay, all right. This coming week will be one of honoring the legacy of former President Jimmy Carter, who died last weekend. His life will be honored tomorrow in Georgia, ahead of next week's state funeral in Washington. Carter made an impact on various communities in Colorado, yet there was still some controversy that erupted this week when a Western Slope state representative took to social media to be negative about the former president, for which he later apologized. But Tyrone, no matter what side of the fence you're on, there is no doubt that this man worked very hard to make this world a better place.
Yes, indeed, Kyle. In reflecting on President Carter's legacy, especially during this most contentious time, I'm just reminded that it is powerful to lead from a place of compassion, from empathy, from centering humanity. I heard a kind of metaphor today that we are in this like cage match sort of political time, right? And as a former cage fighter, I kind of take offense to that, because in training for that type of thing, there's an immense amount of respect, compassion, and empathy you have for your training partners, your fellow athletes. And so I think looking deeper and kind of juxtaposing those two things, and with what the representative from the Western Slope said, I think going into what is likely to be a very turbulent time, we have to remember, President Carter and his compassion, his empathy, and we have to center that and realize that we can come from a place of strength and we can overcome anything if we come together and we really center humanity.
I was really disappointed by the tweet, or whatever we call it now on X. I thought really, really poor judgment. That said, a lot of my views politically were shaped by the Carter administration. I am the child of Reagan Democrats, so I'll leave that there. I don't necessarily have to agree with somebody, however, to acknowledge what great things President Carter did post-presidency. He was very involved in Colorado, a man who lived by his faith. He gave. He got involved in causes he believed in. The Adaptive Sports Center in Crested Butte, which services those with disabilities to allow them to ski and do the things that we love to do here in Colorado, largely is successful because he gave seed money in the late 80s to that program, and it's alive and well today. What it's taught me is that there are good people on every side of an issue. And if we can acknowledge that, think of how many great things we could get done instead of the infighting and what we see in the polarization of politics right now.
Mm-hmm. What strikes me about President Carter is he was clear, rational, practical, not interested in drama or chaos, which is how I would define how we engage as citizens, how our politics are engaging today. So it's a moment for us to reflect on his ability to be that humanitarian, to come at the issues of our country in a way that is for the betterment of all of us and not for the drama that we unfortunately tend to are drawn towards this day. I do think in terms of Habitat for Humanity, he called that out. He called out the issue of affordable housing well before the rest of the country realized that we have a tremendous housing crisis in our country now, and he was well ahead of us trying to solve that problem.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Patty.
There was another issue that Jimmy Carter was really ahead on, and it was during his presidency. So he looked at the energy crisis, the coming energy crisis, and decided we needed to pursue alternative energies. So he put solar panels on the White House, which Reagan immediately took down when he moved in, but he believed in looking into renewables. And he came to Colorado in 1978. Westward was 8 months old at the time, and he went to Rick's Cafe, a swingin' singles joint. He was accompanied by then Senator Gary Hart, and he wanted to go see, at this swingin' singles joint, they had a solar-operated dishwasher. So Jimmy Carter came, checked out how that was going. He also is responsible for NREL being here, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, which got its start as CERI, the Solar Energy Research Lab. So Colorado has a lot to thank him for.
Indeed. For a comprehensive look back at the life and work of Jimmy Carter, there's a compelling video biography that's currently streaming on pbs12.org as part of the award-winning The President's series. I recommend you check it out. A new law passed by the legislature is getting some extra attention this first week of January as the second phase of this law is taking effect. Back in 2020, Colorado's cage-free egg law passed, mandating that all eggs sold in Colorado be from a cage-free facility. But that is not the reason there are fewer eggs in grocery stores or why prices have been higher over the holiday season. A lot of people have been very vocal on social media about this, Chris. You are tapped into the ag industry. You know a lot of people in that world. So let's just start with you on this topic.
So I'm going to disagree with you just a
You
little
are?
bit. Just
Okay.
a little bit.
Okay.
Okay. I think it's more nuanced. And here's why. This new law does add costs to producers.
Right.
Because they have to pay more labor to keep the animals clean because they're not in a confined space. Now, I'm all for the ethical treatment of animals, but to say that it's not going to really contribute to what we're experiencing now, I think is a little short-sighted. However, they are talking about the avian flu, typically blamed, it was blamed last year for the egg shortage as well. It takes 4 to 6 months for a chick to reach maturity and start producing eggs. So let's get breeding some chickens, I guess, is the solution. Let's find a cure to the avian flu, but also let's acknowledge that there is more cost due to now having this law in place.
Right, so there is an added cost, but it's kind of like a double whammy because
It's a double whammy. Perfect storm.
There are less eggs because they're with the flu.
We need more chickens.
We need more chickens. We do.
Yes.
Healthy chickens.
This is a supply and demand response, right, that we're experiencing that has a couple different factors coming into it. And if we go back to drama and crisis reactions, people are going to want to find one answer for why everything's wrong, or and that's unfortunately what's been happening on X. Hopefully, they are doing additional research. But we live in a capitalist society, and when there is a shortage of supply, whether it's avian flu, whether it's also an increase in price because labor costs have gone up, they estimate 17 to 19% in labor costs. There's going to be an increase in cost. Does it deliver for all people better eggs that are great protein and a great source of protein? Yes. It's easy for me to say I can afford 17 to 19%, but not everybody can. And for many, poor working families, that might pinch them pretty hard.
Patty.
Happier eggs, but the chickens, that will never be born out of those eggs. Although, as of January 1st, those chicks can't smoke flavored tobacco either in Denver. So I'm glad our legislators are spending so much time on some of these things. The avian flu is something we're really going to be watching in the new year. There is no question that is the lion's share of the cost increases. But when it's cured, we're not going to see the price of eggs go down much. But we have to keep an eye, talking about lion's share, in the wild animal sanctuaries in California, we've heard about it in Colorado, that the avian flu is now showing up with some of those animals. So this is really going to be a scourge outside of the dairy shelf at your supermarket.
Okay. All right, Tyrone.
Yeah, and then on top of the avian flu, which I think decreases the supply, you have that really high seasonal demand. Around the holidays, everyone's baking and making delicious Christmas desserts. Everyone's, got the eggnog production. And so, at a time when probably you have record use of eggs, you have this huge shortage because of the avian flu. But unfortunately, certain, actors are trying to take advantage of this and stir up a bunch of drama. I think the reality is, this is going to become the new normal. We're not talking about chickens roaming around acres of sort of free range lands. They're just not allowed to be in those cages stuffed next to each other like they unfortunately have in sort of decades past. And I think we might see what we saw in California when they did this in 22, where you saw the price going from $2.23 a dozen going up to $2.87 a dozen in January when the law went into effect. But by February, it sort of recalibrated. People had gotten used to the new conditions, and it was back down to $2.24 a dozen. So hopefully we see everything sort of stabilize, the market get used to this. It's really, as everyone has said, I agree, the avian flu is what we're going to need to deal with in the future.
Well, and hopefully if there are more chickens producing eggs, we should see a difference by the summer. 4 to 6 months, maybe there will be a difference.
I read that Colorado is near the bottom when it comes to egg production. And so the cost is bringing the eggs in from elsewhere. That drives the cost.
Yeah.
All right, we will see, but you're right. We'll continue talking about the avian flu. Now let's talk about the development that is needed in 2025 to address our area growth. Affordable housing will continue to be a big issue for many years to come. And one problem that we hear over and over is how long it takes to get permits. Well, Denver's Office of Community Planning and Development is planning to spend over $1 million into artificial intelligence tools, which, Laura, are said to reduce review times by 50%?
So, let's break that down a little
Okay.
bit. So $1.3 million in an over $1 billion budget for the city is a drop in the bucket. Yes, it's a good first step. It will eat at the edge of that extended permitting time. Will it reduce it by 50%? I would say no. And the factors that really influence, the review time is, first and foremost, what we experience right now is the interest rate. If you think about how few cranes are out there in our city right now, it is a direct response to the fact that the interest rates are still too high, and it is hard for developers to borrow that high of dollar amount. So that means the submittal, there are fewer applications. That means the wait time, review times decrease. And so then the administration reports on increased review, decrease in review time. So good news, it's not really a factor. I mean, not to, throw shade here, but it's not really a factor of people doing faster reviews or AI. It's the stock market, it's construction costs, it's interest rates, it's geopolitics influencing cost of gas, cost of anything that all goes into building a building. So we just need to take a minute here to recognize that there are multiple parties and multiple factors in this development review. And I would also just pitch for continued reform of zoning code and into all the rules and regulations, of which there are more than 40 agencies that have input into development review. And there's a great opportunity for reform there.
A lot of it is all the factors Laura said, but simply nonsense. I talked to one restaurateur. It's taken him 8 months to get a permit for an awning. I would say cutting that in half isn't reasonable. It should take a week. And I'm hopeful that the city has just announced that Bill Mosier has been contracted to be the city projects manager to oversee a lot of what's going on, including the Downtown Denver program that we just passed in November, to have over $500 million in a pool for projects downtown. What I like about Bill Mosier is this is the end of his career. He's not fighting to get a new job. He doesn't need the retirement benefits. He really wants to make Denver work better. I think he knows enough of the players and the processes to do it, but we're going to want to keep an eye on him and everything else to make sure that money goes to the right places to bring back downtown.
Tyrone.
Kyle, I think this issue is multifaceted, as everyone has said. But I do think a drop in the bucket investment in AI, can really yield, I think, some exponential return on that investment. Is it going to be 50%? Maybe they're drawing from some of the other statistics they've seen in other industries. Probably not. But I think that the nature of AI is a small investment can lead to some great administrative efficiencies, a reduction in friction, and it should not take that long for folks to get permits. So I do applaud them, which is a very small investment that could yield something really, I think, monumental potentially. And at the end of the day, what really needs to happen is we need to see more engagement with some of these community partners to make sure that some of these projects that are moving forward, we do have community buy-in. And hopefully by taking away some of these, I think, junior reviewer tasks, we can focus more on that.
Okay, all right.
I've spoken to large developers who don't want to do business in Denver anymore because it takes so long to get a permit through. I'm all for bringing efficiency to the process. If AI can help that, excellent. I think it should have the human oversight, which they say it will. Regulation. Laura brought that up. Regulation is a way of bringing more efficiency. Why do we have so many laws regarding what we are building? If those can be reviewed and simplified, maybe that makes the process simpler. So.
Okay, and apparently these review tools will not go into place till this summer. So we still have a few months. Is that right?
I think I've said before on this show that there is a pace of government that happens, and it is not quick, but it is thorough, and it is checking with community. It's having open meetings with all the constituents to make sure they got it as close as they could as they go into new formulations of review. So,
okay. All right.
Best.
Let's talk about some of the highs and lows from this week. There are quite a few lows. We will start with the lows so we can end on a high note, and I will start with you, Patty.
Journalists around the world have faced a lot of challenges and threats, but to find a journalist being threatened in Mesa County by a disgruntled taxi driver who thought who said this is now Trump's America and didn't take kindly to the fact that this journalist and TV reporter happened to maybe have some Pacific Island background. It's appalling and good for Mesa County to have charged him.
Okay.
The report as far as the impact from Yvonne Missy Woods, who was the DNA an analysis person over with CBI, just came out, and I think it was encouraging how quickly they were able to get it done, but the impact is 1,000+ cases that are impacted cases. I guess sort of the silver lining is we have $7.4 million, $3 million for retesting, and $4.4 for DA's offices to review these cases. I think that the Innocence Project up in Boulder may be getting involved and advocating for some of this. We'll see if that's enough money and how far and wide the damage potentially goes, but yeah, not good.
Colorado GOP, keep an eye on this spring as they go into reformulating the Central Committee and picking a new chair. Right now they're proposing bylaws, which is, I'll call it a sleight of hand. What they are doing is they're changing language regarding who can be a part of the Central Committee now, eliminating certain people that would be a part of that committee, and language regarding opting out of the primary. If the Republican Party chooses to opt out of the primary, there will be no Republican Party in Colorado.
Okay, all right. Laura.
Well, we've had a number of tragedies this week around men making disastrous decisions and injuring or killing, dozens of people, and it happens on a regular basis. I do want to highlight there is a new American Institute for Boys and Men based in DC that is really focused on the conversation that we need to have as Americans with men and boys and women about what is their role in this changing society. How do men and boys, how are they successful? And so it's a great time for us to begin focusing on all of us, not just women. I mean, I'm happy to, we've faced a lot of challenges, but men and boys are facing a lot of challenges. I say this because I have 2 young men as children, and I see some of their challenges in finding their place in this new America.
Huh, okay, all right, good. Thank you for sharing. Patty, something good.
Get up, get out, downtown next Thursday. It's the Stock Show Parade. Even if you don't go to the Stock Show, you've got to go to the parade.
Right down the street. Yeah, that's good. It's a good one.
Bumping the minimum wage at the first of the year in Denver is already all the way at $18.81. I think that's just great, especially given all of the price increases we've seen. I think higher minimum wage means more job growth, more consumer spending, higher sales tax revenue, and finally able to compete with some of this gig economy work.
ARC Thrift Stores is having a fundraiser coming up in February to support Inclusion International and also the ARC of the U.S. Organization. They help individuals with development disabilities, put them to work, give them purpose in life. I am on the host committee for the fundraiser, full disclosure. If you want to know more information about supporting ARC, you can go to the arcofco, meaning Colorado.org.
Okay, good. All right. Laura.
Well, a few months ago, my disgrace of the week was the buildings at Colfax and Franklin, there was a battle to whether to keep them or demolish them. And having grown up here, I just was like, get rid of these things. Good news, they have been preserved, and I have a little humble pie to eat. The architect's renderings from SAR Architecture are fantastic, and the community really came around and rallied, and it's going to be a great solution. And so I'm happy to see those buildings, those mansions preserved.
Okay, all right, good. My high was receiving compliments about this show from my priest during Christmas week. He applauded all of us who work on Colorado Inside Out for addressing at sometimes difficult topics, listening to each other's perspectives, and when we disagree, we do so with respect. Pope Francis has called for this year to be a time of hope in the world, which is suffering from a lot. Violence, as we saw this week, to disconnectedness and disagreements, war, climate change, affordability. We have a lot to discuss this year ahead, and leaders have a lot to attend to as well, and we all have the opportunity and responsibility to listen to one another, understand each other, and work together as Coloradans do. So let's get to work with some hope. Thank you for your Insight panel, each of you. I appreciate it. Thank you for watching here on PBS 12 or on YouTube or listening to our podcast on Spotify and Apple. I'm Kyle Dyer. I will see you next week here on PBS 12.
PBS 12 believes in the power of original, local programming. Help us bring more shows, like the one you just watched, by donating at pbs12.org/program support today.